The ice storm had arrived without warning. Winds screamed across the frozen lands. Carrying snow like blades, the sky was dark, and even the strongest searchlights struggled to cut through the blizzard. Ethan moved slowly through the storm, wearing a thick coat and powered exosuit to stay warm. He was a supply runner, working alone in the outer zones. His job was simple: check for damaged equipment and bring back useful parts. But today, his scanner beeped with something strange. A weak signal flickered on the screen, coming from the edge of the mountain pass. It was a distress beacon, but it wasn't human. He frowned and narrowed his eyes, trying to read the signal through the snow. It was alien tech, old and barely working. He almost ignored it, but something told him to check. With the wind howling in his ears, Ethan pushed forward, following the faint signal. His boots crunched over the deep snow, and his breath fogged. Up inside the helmet, then he saw her, curled up between two sharp rocks. Barely moving was a small figure. Her skin was pale blue, her hair silver and thin, and her body wrapped in torn cloth. She was an alien child, no more than 7 or 8 years old in human terms. Her body shook from the cold, and her large black eyes were filled with tears. Tears that were starting to freeze on her cheeks. Ethan quickly dropped to his knees and opened his thermal blanket. He wrapped her inside and lifted her gently. Her skin was ice cold, and she was too weak to speak. "It's okay," he said softly. "You're safe now." The child looked up at him, eyes wide with fear. Her lips moved slowly, speaking in her alien tongue. His translator picked up only a few broken words. Hide, not safe. They come. Ethan's heart pounded. Who was coming? Why was she alone out here in the middle of a deadly storm? He checked for wounds. No blood, no cuts, but she was clearly in shock. He looked around. No tracks, no signs of anyone else. The wind had erased all footprints without wasting time. Ethan activated the return signal to his private shelter. It was a small, hidden cabin built into the side of a hill just 2 miles away. He had made it for emergencies like this, carrying the girl in his arms. Ethan moved as fast as the storm allowed. He shielded her face with his jacket and kept whispering soft words. He didn't know if she understood him, but he hoped his voice gave her some comfort after what felt like hours. He reached the shelter and kicked open the heavy door. Warm air rushed out and lights flickered to life. He placed her on the bed and began heating a nutrient drink. The girl didn't move much, just lay there quietly, still wrapped in the blanket. Ethan gently touched her shoulder and she flinched. "It's all right," he said again, trying to smile. "I'm not going to hurt you." After a few minutes, the heat started to work, and some color returned to her cheeks. She sipped the drink slowly, her hands shaking. Ethan sat across from her, watching carefully. He had seen aliens before: traders, guards, engineers, but never a child, and never this close. He tapped his translator again and asked, "What's your name?" The girl hesitated, then said in a soft voice, "Sira." "Okay, Sira." He nodded. "My name's Ethan." She looked at him with wide eyes, like she didn't know whether to trust him or not. But then, slowly, she nodded. Suddenly, the shelters warning light blinked. Ethan stood up fast and checked the screen. Something was moving outside. The storm was still raging, but his sensor caught a shadow passing nearby. Too big for an animal, too quiet for a rescue team. Ethan's mind raced. Was someone following the girl? Were they still out there, searching? He turned to Sira, who was now sitting upright, her eyes filled with fear again. "Are they after you?" he asked. She didn't speak, but her silence was answer enough. Ethan locked the doors and powered up the external defense grid. His small shelter wasn't made for battle, but it could hold off scouts for a short time. He sat down next to her again, heart heavy. He had no idea what he was now part of, but one thing was clear: Sira needed help. And he was the only one who had found her. Outside, the storm howled louder. Inside, Two strangers sat together, both unsure of what was coming next, but Ethan had already made his choice. He would protect her, no matter what. Asterisk, the wind outside kept screaming like angry ghosts. But inside the small shelter, things were too quiet. Ethan sat next to the heating unit, eyes watching the girl named Sierra as she rested under thick blankets. She had stopped shivering, but her face still showed fear. Ethan's mind raced. Who was she running from? Why was she left alone in such a deadly storm? The motion sensor near the door blinked again. This time, Ethan didn't wait. He quietly walked to the control panel and checked the outside cameras. Nothing, just blowing snow. But the sensor was never wrong. It had picked up something, and whatever it was still out there. He stepped away and looked at Sarah. She was awake now, sitting up slowly. Her dark alien eyes stared at him with sadness. Something else worry. You said they were coming, Ethan said, kneeling beside her. Who are they? Sarah opened her mouth but closed it again. Her hands trembled as she lifted them to her chest. Then she whispered something in her language, and the translator spoke. Bad men, not animals. Men with masks. Ethan's eyes narrowed. He had heard rumors before about secret groups doing dark things in the frozen zones, but no one believed them. Now, it seemed the rumors were real. He stood up, grabbed his tool bag, and opened the trapdoor to the bunker's basement. Sarah, he said calmly, we can't stay here. The storm is keeping us hidden for now, but once it clears, they'll find us. She looked scared again and hugged the blanket tight. Ethan hated seeing fear in a child's eyes. Even if she wasn't human, she was still just a kid. We'll move before they get too close, he promised. He went downstairs to check supplies emergency. Rations, med kits, batteries, and power cells. He grabbed everything he could carry. As he worked, he heard a strange noise above. A high-pitched hum, barely there, but wrong. He rushed back upstairs, and Sarah was looking at the ceiling in terror. What is it? He asked quickly. She pointed up, voice shaking, eyes in the sky. Ethan ran to the panel and switched to infrared view, and there it was. Above the shelter, moving slow through the storm, a drone, round and silent. Scanning the area, he cursed under his breath. They had found her signal, and now they were watching. Ethan powered down all outside lights and cut the heat just low enough to stay alive. He activated signal jammers from his bag and tossed one near the window. The drone outside paused for a second and drifted away, but that meant others would come soon. Sarah was sitting very still, eyes closed, lips moving in silent prayer. Ethan gently touched her shoulder. She flinched, then looked up at him. We can't stay here, he said again. There's an old research station, 5 clicks north, abandoned, but with better defenses. I'll take you there. You help me? She asked softly. The translator spoke the words like a song. Ethan nodded. Yes. Sarah looked away for a moment, then slowly reached into her blanket. She pulled out a small metal disc with alien writing on it. She placed it in his hand. Keep. It's safe, she said. It proves truth. Ethan didn't understand fully, but he pocketed the disc. Something told him it was important. Before leaving, he packed the thermal blankets into his exosuit. He gave Sarah extra heat packs and wrapped her in a coat that nearly swallowed her whole. Ready? He asked. She nodded, holding tightly onto a strap of his suit. They stepped into the storm again. Snow whipped against them, and visibility was almost zero. But Ethan used his scanner to guide the way. After 1 mile, they heard a low thud in the distance, then another. Heavy footsteps moving through the snow. Ethan pulled Sarah behind a large boulder and activated his cloak field. It would hide them for just a few seconds. A shape moved past them, tall, armored, and glowing with scanner lights. A human soldier, but not from any known force. His armor was black and had no flags or names. Just a red mark on the chest, like a fang. Sierra was shaking again, clutching Ethan's hand tightly. He held her close and didn't move until the soldier disappeared into the snow. Then they moved again, this time faster. The research station was just ahead, barely visible in the blowing snow. Old metal walls, rusted. Doors and long abandoned towers stood like ghosts. They slipped inside through a back hatch. Ethan sealed it and reconnected the power. Dim lights flickered to life. Sierra walked slowly down the dusty hallway. She touched a wall and whispered something in her language. Then she turned to Ethan and said, "This is where I escaped from." Ethan froze. This place wasn't abandoned after all. It was where it all began. And now, they had returned to the lion's den. The air inside the research station was cold and heavy. Dust covered everything, and broken lights blinked weakly above. The silence was thick, like the place was holding its breath. Ethan looked around carefully, his flashlight cutting through the darkness. The walls were old, but he noticed something strange. There was no frost. Even in this storm, the inside was warm enough to stop the snow. That meant something was still powering parts of the station. Sierra walked slowly beside him, her steps small and cautious. Her eyes scanned the old doors and broken monitors with a look of fear and memory. This place, she whispered, was not made for help. Ethan could feel the tension in her voice. "What happened here?" he asked. She stopped and pointed at a door sealed with metal bolts. "This is where they kept us." Ethan moved forward and forced the door open using his suit's strength. Inside, he found a dark room lined with strange chairs with restraints. There were screens above them and wires dangling from the ceiling. Ethan's stomach twisted. This wasn't a lab, it was a testing chamber. He stepped in slowly. Scanning for data logs or power terminals, Sarah stood at the doorway, arms wrapped around herself like she was freezing again. "I remember the lights," she said. "They were always too bright." Ethan looked back at her. "Were there other kids?" he asked gently. She nodded once. 5. Maybe 6. He found a power console in the corner and powered it on. Old files began loading, and faded audio logs played through the static. Subject 7 shows unusual resistance to cold. We believe her fear activates a protective field, possible bioenergy. Further testing tomorrow. Must push her to limit. Sierra lowered her head, tears forming again. "That's me," she said, voice barely a whisper. Ethan clenched his fists. They were using children for experiments, and the worst part wasn't aliens doing it, it was humans. He pulled a data drive from his bag and started copying everything. If they could expose what happened here, maybe someone would finally listen. But then he noticed something even worse. A hidden folder labeled Project Reclamation. Active. He opened it, and a map appeared on the screen. The facility was sending out tracking pulses, active beacons, searching for escapees. And one red dot blinked right in the middle. "That was them. We need to go now," Ethan said, grabbing Sierra's hand. "They know we're here." Suddenly, the station shook. A loud boom echoed down the hallway. Then another. Explosions. They were breaching the entrance. Ethan looked around and found a maintenance tunnel behind the lab. He opened the hatch and pushed Sierra through first, then climbed down. It was narrow and dark, but it led to the back of the station. They could escape if they moved fast. As they crawled, Sarah stopped. "There's something here," she said softly. Ethan turned his light forward. In the shadows was a metal door, half covered in ice. But on it was a Kyril symbol, the same glowing design on Sierra's wrist. He touched the door, and it slid open with a quiet hiss. Inside was a small chamber filled with alien tech unlike anything Ethan had ever seen. Floating in the center was a crystal core. Pulsing slowly, Sierra walked in carefully, her wrist glowing as she approached. The crystal responded to her light and sent out a soft hum. "This is our memory," she said. "They took it from my people. We were meant to protect this." Ethan didn't understand the full meaning, but he saw it in her eyes. This wasn't just a child. She was a key to something far bigger. He pulled the crystal out of its base and sealed it in his pack. They had no time left. The tunnel shook again as another blast hit the building above. They ran through the back exit, snow hitting their faces like knives in the distance. Black armored soldiers dropped from shuttles like shadows in the wind, but Ethan and Sierra didn't stop. They vanished into the snow, heading toward the old canyon pass, the only route left that led far away from human-controlled zones. As they ran, Sierra held his hand tighter. "You are not like the others," she said. Ethan looked at her and gave a half smile. "I'm not," he replied. "And I'm not letting them take you again behind them." The facility burned under the storm-filled sky, but in Ethan's bag, the stolen truth now glowed a memory. Crystal that could reveal everything. The snow was deep, the wind was loud. But for the first time, they weren't just running. They were fighting back. Together, the wind screamed through the canyon. Carrying snow and whispers, Ethan and Sierra moved fast, their boots crunching against the frozen ground. Above them, drones passed through the clouds, searching for heat, sound, or movement, but Ethan had planned for this. He stopped near a cliff and opened a hidden box buried in the snow. Inside were signal jammers, flares, and pulse mines, old tools from his smuggling days. He tossed 2 jammers behind them, and the signal went dark. "We have 10 minutes before they get smart," he said. Sierra nodded, her eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. She didn't complain, didn't cry. She just followed him, trusting him completely. The crystal memory core from the lab pulsed gently in Ethan's bag. It felt like it had a heartbeat of its own. Sierra said it was more than data, held living memories of her people. If humans could see those memories, maybe they would stop the experiments. Maybe. But first, they had to survive. Ethan's old friend, Nika, had promised to meet them at a broken shuttle pad not far from the mountain's base. She was a smuggler, sharp and fast, and owed Ethan for saving her life once. But he wasn't sure he could trust her now as they reached the shuttle pad. Ethan held Sierra behind him and looked around carefully. The place was half buried in ice, with metal parts sticking out like broken bones. Then movement. A small ship powered up and rose from the ground, lights blinking. The hatch opened, and Nika stepped out, her coat flapping in the wind. She smiled when she saw Ethan. "You're late," she said. Ethan walked forward slowly. "You came," he said. "I need you to get her off-world." Nika looked at Sierra, then raised an eyebrow. "She's just a kid." "She's more than that," Ethan replied. "She's the proof." Nika nodded, then stepped back into the ship. "Bring her in." "I've got clearance for one jump." Ethan hesitated. Something felt off. Too easy, too smooth. As he stepped onto the ramp with Sierra, he heard a sound, metal sliding. He turned. Soldiers in black armor were stepping out from behind the rocks, rifles raised, red lights blinking. Nika stood at the top of the ramp, her face cold now. "I had to," she said quietly. "They offered a reward I couldn't refuse." Ethan pulled Sierra behind him and drew his sidearm. "You betrayed me," he said. "You betrayed her." Nika looked down, guilt in her eyes. "I thought it was just a job," she said. "I didn't know what they were doing to the kids." The soldiers stepped forward. "Hand over the alien," the lead one ordered. "You'll be spared." Ethan stood firm. "No," he said simply. The leader raised his gun. "Then you'll die for nothing." Suddenly, Sierra stepped forward, her hands glowing blue. Her voice rose in a strange alien tone, and her wrist mark began to shine brightly. The crystal in Ethan's bag pulsed with it, reacting to her energy. And then a shockwave exploded from her body. The soldiers were thrown backward like leaves in a storm. The ship shook, alarms screaming. Nika fell to her knees, covering her head. Ethan grabbed Sierra, whose knees buckled from the blast. She had used her strength, but it had cost her. Her eyes rolled back, and she collapsed in his arms. Unconscious, he ran toward the cliff as more troops descended in the distance. No more time, no more hiding. Ethan spotted a half-buried cargo hauler nearby, an old one from mining days. He forced the hatch open, threw Sierra inside, and powered it up. The engine groaned, but came to life. He didn't have clearance, didn't have a flight plan, but he had something better. A reason. The hauler lifted off slowly. Wind blasting its sides as it rose, gunfire struck the metal frame. Ethan didn't stop. He pushed the throttle and launched into the clouds. Behind them, Nika watched in silence. She had made her choice, but Ethan had made a different one. He had said no, no to the lies, no to the experiments, no to the silence inside the hauler. Sierra slept, and Ethan looked down at the glowing crystal. Now it pulsed stronger, like it knew the path ahead. Ethan gripped the controls. This wasn't just about saving a girl anymore. This was about saving what made them human, and for the first time in his life, he felt like a hero. The old ruins appeared beneath them like bones sticking out of the snow. Ethan guided the hauler down slowly, landing between cracked metal walls and frost-covered towers. This place had once been a shuttle terminal. Now it was just scrap and silence. He looked at Sierra, who was still weak, resting in the co-pilot seat. Her breathing had become steady again, but her skin still glowed faint blue from the energy she used earlier. She needs time, Ethan said to himself. But time was the one thing they didn't have. As soon as the engines cooled, Ethan opened the ramp and stepped out into the frozen yard. The wind was lighter here, but the air felt strange to quiet. He scanned the area, weapons ready. Nika had sent a last message before they left, coordinates to meet a true smuggler. Ally, a pilot named Ress, someone who hated the military and helped refugees escape. But now, Ethan wasn't sure he believed anything anymore. He tapped his comms. "This is Ethan. I'm here at the ruins." No answer. He tried again. Nothing but static. Behind him, Sierra stepped out slowly, wrapped in a thick blanket. Her eyes were distant but alert. "This place is full of pain," she said softly. Ethan looked at her, surprised. "You've been here before?" She shook her head. "No, but I can feel it." Before he could respond, he heard the sound of a ship, low and loud, not quiet like a smuggler's vessel. It wasn't Ress. It was military. Back inside. Ethan shouted, grabbing Sierra's hand, but they were already surrounded. Troops dropped from above, black armor, red visors, boots crushing the ice. Laser sights lit up the snow, pointing at Ethan and Sierra. From the front of the line, a man stepped forward. Commander Dren. Ethan recognized him from old files. He was head of Project Reclamation, the man who gave the orders to take alien children. "Ethan," Dren said coldly, "you've been busy." Ethan raised his gun, but didn't fire. "Let her go," he said. "She's just a child." Dren smiled. "She's not just a child," he said. "She's a living key, and you've stolen government property." "She's not property," Ethan snapped. "She's alive. And I won't let you touch her again." Dren waved a hand, and two soldiers stepped forward. Sierra backed away, eyes wide. The mark on her wrist began to glow again. "You feel it, don't you?" Dren said to her. "You remember what we started, what you can become." Sierra shook her head, tears running down her face. "I don't want that," she whispered. "I don't want to hurt anyone." But the energy inside her pulsed, the crystal in Ethan's bag lit up, responding to her fear. Dren reached into his coat and held up a small remote. With a click, it activated a signal. Sierra screamed, not in pain, but in memory. She fell to her knees as images flashed through her mind labs. Wires, other children screaming. They had tried to trigger her power, and now that pain was coming back. Ethan rushed to her and covered her with his arms. "Stay with me, Sierra," he whispered. "You are not a weapon." Suddenly, the air began to crackle. Blue light burst from Sierra's skin, wrapping around them both like a storm. The snow melted in a perfect circle around them, and soldiers staggered back, shields raised. Ethan held her tightly, whispering calming words, and the light began to focus, not explode. Not destroy. It formed a shielded dome of light, protecting them from every direction. Dren stared in disbelief. "She's controlling it," he said. "That's not possible." But it was. Sierra opened her eyes, glowing with a strange, peaceful fire. "No more cages," she said. "No more pain." The shield pulsed outward, knocking weapons from the soldiers' hands without, hurting them. A silent wave of force swept through the ruins. And in that moment, no one could move but her. She stood, and the energy faded slowly. Ethan looked up at her, amazed. "You did that?" he said. "You stopped it." Sierra nodded, breathing hard. "I chose to protect," she whispered. "Because you protected me." Dren fell to his knees, stunned. His troops didn't fight. They were afraid now, afraid of a child who didn't want to be a weapon, but had power greater than they imagined. Ethan picked up the bag, helped Sierra walk, and stepped past the frozen soldiers. They climbed back into the hauler. This time, no one tried to stop them, as the engines roared to life again. Ethan looked at the girl beside him. She wasn't a helpless child anymore. She was becoming something new, a protector, a voice for her people, and Ethan knew now. The war was no longer just between soldiers and rebels. It was between those who chose control and those who chose compassion. And Sierra had made her choice. The old hauler shook as it lifted into the sky. Ethan pushed the throttle forward, engines roaring beneath his hands. Snow blasted off the hull as the ship rose from the ruins. Behind them, the soldiers didn't follow. They just watched in silence. Still stunned by what they had seen, Sierra sat in the co-pilot's seat. Wrapped in silence, she stared out the window. Her face calm but distant, her hands glowed faintly, still holding the last echoes of her power. "You okay?" Ethan asked, glancing at her. She nodded slowly. "I didn't want to hurt them," she whispered. "I just wanted them to stop." Ethan gave her a small smile. "You did the right thing," he said. "They'll remember it." As the ship climbed higher, the clouds thinned. Stars began to appear through the upper atmosphere. But so did something else. Red lights blinked on the radar. Ethan's face hardened. "They sent fighters," he said. "To interceptors fast, armed." And angry, the radio crackled. And a cold voice came through. "This is Command Alpha. Stand down your vessel or be destroyed." Ethan switched off the radio. "Yeah, not happening," he muttered. He turned to Sierra. "We're not out of this yet. Hold on tight." The hauler wasn't built for combat. It was old, rusty, and slow, but Ethan knew every trick it had left. He dived the ship hard to the left, sliding through a thin storm cloud. One of the interceptors followed, firing a beam that missed by inches. The second came from above, trying to cut off escape. Sierra looked down at the controls. "I can help," she said quietly. "What do you mean?" Ethan asked, keeping one hand on the yoke. She placed her glowing hand on the console. Instantly, the lights in the ship flickered and then stabilized. The engines roared louder. The shields grew stronger. "She's boosting the ship," Ethan said in awe. Somehow, she was connecting to the alien tech still buried in the ship's systems. A laser struck the wing, and alarms blared, shield holding. Sierra whispered, sweat on her forehead. But not for long. Ethan twisted the ship hauler into a dive. Below them was a frozen mountain range, ice peaks as sharp as knives. He flew between them, trying to lose the interceptors in the chaos. One of the ships followed too close. Its wing clipped a cliff edge and exploded in a flash of fire, and ice one down, Ethan said. But the second ship was smarter. It rose above the mountains and fired a tracking missile. Sierra's eyes glowed brighter. She raised her hand and the missile froze mid-air completely still. Then it dropped harmlessly into the snow. The second interceptor pulled back, unsure its pilot had seen enough. He turned away and vanished into the clouds. Ethan let out a long breath. "Nice work," he said. Sierra didn't reply. Her body trembled slightly. Using that much power again had weakened her. Ethan adjusted course and aimed for orbit. "We're heading for the outer ring," he said. "There's a relay station up their neutral zone. We'll find help." Minutes later, the ship passed through the last layer of atmosphere. Stars surrounded them, quiet and bright. The hauler drifted past space debris, satellites, and old cargo lines. And then, ahead, the relay station appeared. A giant ring spinning in space, lights glowing across its arms. It was a trade post used by smugglers, merchants, and travelers from across the stars. Ethan sent a coded signal. "This is cargo ship Eco 17, requesting emergency docking." A moment passed, then a voice answered, "Permission granted." Docking Bay 12, the hauler slid into the bay and landed with a soft thud. The doors opened and a cool metallic hallway greeted them. Ethan helped Sierra out of the seat. She leaned on him, weak but alert. Inside the station, lights flickered overhead. People from many worlds walked past. Aliens, humans, hybrids. No one asked questions. It was the perfect place to disappear. They entered a small safe house Ethan had used years ago. He closed the door behind them and locked it. Sierra sat on the bed, and for the first time in days, she smiled. "We made it," she said softly. Ethan smiled back. "Yeah," he said. "We did." But then a knock. He grabbed his blaster and moved to the door. A voice spoke from the other side. "I'm not here to fight," it said. "I saw what she did, and I want to help." Ethan opened the door slowly. A tall alien woman stood there, wearing a long coat and carrying an old Kyril crest. "I'm from the sanctuary," she said. "She's one of us." Sierra stood slowly, her eyes wide. "You're Kyril?" The woman nodded. "And we've been waiting for you." Ethan looked at Sierra, and for the first time, she looked like she belonged. They weren't running anymore. They were going home. The ship glided through the stars like a ghost, silent, graceful, ancient. It wasn't human-made. It was Kyril, a sacred vessel only used in times of great need. Ethan stood near the viewing window, watching as stars drifted past. Sierra sat beside him, her eyes calm now, glowing softly with pale blue light across from them. The Kyril woman Leo piloted the ship without touching a single control. Her mind was connected directly to the vessel, part of the ship, as much as its metal and memory. "We are almost there," Elia said gently. "You will be safe." Sierra looked up at Ethan. "Are you coming with me?" she asked in a small voice. Ethan smiled. "I promised to protect you, didn't I?" She reached for his hand and held it tightly. She no longer looked like the scared, shivering child he had found in the ice. Now, she looked like something more, like a spark, ready to grow into something powerful. Ahead of them, a glowing planet appeared. It was small, green, surrounded by rings of crystal mist. "Is that it?" Ethan asked. Elia nodded. "Kyril's heart," she said. "The sanctuary moon." Hidden from war, from weapons, from greed, as they entered the planet's orbit. Ethan noticed strange things: birds with 6 wings flying through silver skies, rivers that shimmered like glass, and trees that sang when the wind touched them. It was peaceful, untouched by machines. The ship landed in a quiet valley filled with soft blue grass and tall glowing trees. Sierra stepped onto the soil and gasped. "I can feel everything," she whispered. "The ground. It knows me." Ethan looked around in awe. This was nothing like Earth. It was alive in ways he couldn't explain. Chiral elders came to greet them, tall beings with long robes and faces full of wisdom. They bowed deeply to Sira. "Welcome home, child of the crystal," they said. She looked up at them. Nervous? "Why me?" She asked, "I don't know how to lead." "You don't need to lead." One elder said, "You need only to heal." They placed a new garment over her shoulders, soft robe with the mark of her people. And then they turned to Ethan. "You are the outsider who carried her through fire and storm." An elder said, "You have no blood here, but you are no stranger." Ethan shifted uncomfortably. "I just did what was right," he said. The elder smiled. "Many say that, few live it." They offered him a place, a small home near the crystal lake. Quiet, peaceful, away from the noise of war and lies. He accepted it. Not because he needed a reward, but because he finally felt peace. Weeks passed. Sira trained with the elders. Learning how to control her energy without pain, she learned about the crystal core, and how her voice could awaken memories long lost. Her laughter returned, bright and full, echoing across the hills. Ethan spent his days helping build new shelters, repairing old machines the Chiral had hidden for generations. He grew a small garden and built a bench by the lake. Every evening, Sira sat beside him, telling him what she had learned. One evening, she handed him a stone marked with Chiral script. "What's this?" He asked. "It's your new name," she said, smiling. "Cathal, it means one who walks between worlds." Ethan looked at the stone for a long time. He wasn't just a soldier anymore. He wasn't just a smuggler or a drifter. He was something new now. He was family, far away. War still raged. Human leaders searched for the missing crystal child, but no one found them. Some whispered of a planet where the stars sang and machines obeyed the will of kindness. But no one believed it. Only Ethan knew the truth, and he would never tell. One morning, Sira stood at the edge of the lake. The crystal she once carried in her wrist now floated before her. She reached out and it sang, a bright, clear sound that echoed across the planet. The elders gathered, smiling. "She is ready." Elia said, "Ready for what?" Ethan asked to remember. Elia replied, "To remind the stars what peace feels like." Ethan stepped back as the crystal glowed. Sira lifted into the air, surrounded by soft blue light, and then, across the galaxy, something changed. Lost. Satellites flickered back on. Broken systems repaired themselves, and across hundreds of worlds, people looked to the stars and felt something good. Hope. Ethan watched with quiet pride. Sira had come home not just to a planet, but to who she truly was. And because one human had said no, everything had changed.